No babysitter lasted with Billionaire's twin sons, until a maid's daughter changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's jump into today's story. Imagine being part of the wealthiest family in the world. Money is no object. You have everything you could ever dream of: luxury cars, vast estates, designer clothes, and exclusive parties. But what happens when your twin sons are so wild and unpredictable that not a single babysitter can last more than a few days? That's the dilemma billionaire businessman Jonathan Westfield was facing. Jonathan, a man known for his ruthless business deals and cold demeanor, had built his empire from the ground up. He was accustomed to control, to having everything go according to his plan. But when it came to his children, especially his rambunctious twin boys, nothing seemed to work. Every babysitter he hired for the boys quit within days. The twins, barely 10 years old, had a knack for causing chaos wherever they went. From throwing tantrums to breaking priceless family heirlooms, it seemed like no one could handle them. Their wild behavior was becoming a problem that even the most experienced nannies couldn't deal with. Jonathan's frustration grew. He needed someone who could control his sons, someone who could instill discipline in them, but more importantly, someone who wouldn't back down. After all, his sons were his legacy. He couldn't afford to let them run wild any longer. That's when he turned to the one person he hadn't considered before, his housekeeper's daughter, Lily. Lily was the daughter of Maria, a woman who had worked as the Westfield family's housekeeper for years. She was just a quiet, 10-year-old girl, often seen sweeping the grand halls or organizing the Westfield estate's sprawling library. She wasn't a part of the family's glamorous world, and yet, she had a quiet confidence that everyone around her seemed to ignore. Maria, her mother, had always kept Lily out of sight. She worked long hours cleaning the grand estate, and Lily was taught to stay in the background. But what nobody knew was that Lily had been observing the twins from a distance for years. She knew them better than anyone. She could sense the frustrations and fears behind their unruly behavior. Lily had a unique ability to connect with people, especially children. She understood their emotions, what they were feeling, and what triggered their outbursts. Unlike the hired nannies who only saw the boys as difficult, Lily saw them as misunderstood. The twins needed a guide, someone who could calm their storm, and Lily, with her kind heart and sharp instincts, was about to be the one to do just that. But Jonathan Westfield, like many wealthy people, didn't believe in the power of a housekeeper's daughter. He viewed Lily as nothing more than a child who was too young and inexperienced to handle such a task. What he didn't realize was that Lily was about to change everything. The days that followed were tense. Jonathan Westfield, still skeptical about the idea of his housekeeper's daughter, Lily, looking after his twin sons, watched from a distance. The decision had been made. He had reluctantly agreed to give Lily a chance. Maria, her mother, had trained her to be quiet and unobtrusive, but Jonathan knew that when it came to controlling his wild sons, silence was not going to work. He needed someone who could stand up to them, someone who wouldn't be intimidated. Lily, however, had no idea what she was stepping into. The twins, Alex and Max, were a whirlwind of energy. Their laughter was loud and reckless, and their pranks, relentless. They had been the terror of every babysitter that had come before her. As Lily arrived at the grand mansion's nursery, her heart pounded. She had been told to be invisible, just like her mother. But now, she was in the spotlight. She had a mission, and it was much bigger than herself. The moment she walked into the nursery, the twins immediately turned their attention to her. Alex, the older of the two by 5 minutes, gave her a mischievous grin. "Who are you, little girl?" he asked, his voice dripping with curiosity and sarcasm. Max, ever the follower, mimicked his brother's grin. "Yeah, are you the new one? You think you can stop us?" Lily looked at them, her gaze calm. She knew the games they were playing. She had seen enough to understand them. "I don't need to stop you," she said softly. "I just need you to listen." The twins exchanged puzzled glances. That was not the response they were used to. Usually, people came in trying to control them, scolding them for their behavior. But Lily wasn't scolding. She wasn't trying to impose authority. She was speaking to them like they were equals, not as children to be managed. Max, always the more impulsive one, grabbed a toy car from the shelf and zoomed it across the floor. "Catch me if you can," he taunted, laughing as he watched Lily's eyes follow the car. But instead of running after it, Lily remained perfectly still. She simply observed, waiting for the moment to come. Alex, intrigued now, took a step forward. "What's your deal?" he asked. "Why don't you just tell us what to do like all the others?" Lily smiled faintly. "Because telling you what to do isn't going to make you listen," she said. "You don't need someone to give orders. You need someone who understands why you're acting out." The twins froze. No one had ever spoken to them this way. Most adults were too afraid or too tired to try to understand the chaos inside them. But Lily wasn't like the others. She wasn't intimidated by their tantrums or their antics. She knew there was more to their behavior than just mischief. It was fear, frustration, and a need for attention that they didn't know how to express. As Lily sat down on the floor, crossing her legs in front of them, the twins remained standing. "You're not going to boss us around?" Alex asked, his voice more curious now than confrontational. "No," Lily answered, "but I am going to help you." There was a moment of silence. Then, without warning, Alex pulled a small puzzle from the shelf and threw it at Lily. It was a challenge, a test to see if she would react. But Lily remained calm, catching the puzzle midair and setting it down gently. "That wasn't nice," she said quietly. "But I know you're better than that." Max, watching the entire exchange, started to feel something he hadn't felt before: respect. He picked up the puzzle and handed it back to Lily. "Okay, maybe you're different," he muttered. Lily's presence was already having an effect on them. The playful hostility that they had greeted her with was slowly being replaced by something else: curiosity. And as the afternoon went on, they began to trust her more. They started to open up, asking her questions and even listening to her suggestions. For the first time in years, the twins weren't being punished or controlled. They were simply being understood. Days passed, and Lily continued to surprise Jonathan Westfield. The twins, who had been uncontrollable before, now began to behave in ways that no one had thought possible. It was subtle at first. Max, the more unpredictable of the two, began to show a flicker of respect toward Lily. He didn't throw things as often, and when he did, he would quickly apologize. Alex, who had always been the more curious twin, started seeking Lily's advice on things. He would ask her to help him with puzzles, and, strangely, he would listen when she spoke to him. Jonathan had been observing from a distance. His initial skepticism had turned into cautious admiration. For the first time, the twins seemed more relaxed. They weren't acting out for attention anymore. Jonathan's suspicion grew. Was this really the same pair of wild children who had terrified every other babysitter? He decided to test Lily. One evening, after a particularly hectic day of meetings, he came home late, hoping to see how Lily would handle the twins when they were at their most difficult. He walked quietly into the living room, watching from behind a pillar as Lily sat on the floor, surrounded by the twins, who were playing with building blocks. They were laughing. It was not the loud, disruptive laughter that filled the house just weeks ago, but something softer, more genuine. He watched as Lily guided Max's hand, showing him how to build a more intricate structure. Max was focused, his usual hyperactive energy channeled into something productive. Alex, not to be outdone, leaned in close to Lily, asking her questions about the blocks and how to balance them. "How do you know so much about this stuff?" Alex asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. Lily smiled softly. "I like to figure things out," she said, glancing at Jonathan, who had been standing silently. "Sometimes, it's just about paying attention." Max looked up at Jonathan, his eyes bright. "She's really smart, Dad," he said with a grin. Jonathan felt a pang in his chest. His sons, who had been so wild and defiant, were now looking up to Lily. The respect they had for her was undeniable. Jonathan stepped forward, his footsteps making a slight sound on the polished floor. "I see you've been busy," he said, his tone more casual than usual. The twins didn't flinch. They didn't run off or try to hide. They simply turned to face him, as if waiting for his next move. Jonathan was stunned. He had expected them to act out, to challenge him, but they didn't. They were calm. Lily's influence was undeniable. "I think you've earned the right to stay," Jonathan said, his voice softer than he intended. He was looking at Lily now, his gaze steady. Lily met his eyes and nodded, as if she knew this was only the beginning. The twins looked back and forth between their father and Lily. Max broke the silence, his voice full of excitement. "Does this mean we can keep her?" Jonathan hesitated for just a moment, then smiled. "Yes, I think it does." That evening, as Jonathan settled into the sofa, he realized something he had never expected. His children, the ones who had been too much for anyone else to handle, had finally found someone who truly understood them. And it was someone who had never been part of their world, someone who had no status, no wealth, no power, and yet had managed to do what no one else could. Lily had earned their trust, not by trying to control them, but by understanding them. Jonathan felt a wave of gratitude for her, something he hadn't felt for anyone in a long time. He leaned back, thinking about how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. He realized that the greatest power didn't come from money or influence, but from something much more valuable, the ability to truly connect with people. As the days passed, Jonathan Westfield continued to watch the remarkable transformation of his twin sons. Alex and Max. Lily had not only gained their trust, but she had also become a key figure in their lives. Her quiet presence, her unwavering patience, and her deep understanding of the twins' needs had brought them to a place where they were no longer out of control. They were calm, focused, and most surprisingly, kind. Jonathan couldn't believe how much had changed. Gone were the tantrums, the loud outbursts, and the constant chaos. Instead, he found his sons engaging in thoughtful conversations with Lily, asking her questions about life, school, and even their future. They wanted to know how to be better, how to make their father proud. It was a side of them Jonathan had never seen before. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Jonathan looked at his sons with a new sense of pride. They were eating quietly, discussing their day, and even helping each other with their food. He realized how much they had grown in such a short time, all thanks to Lily. As dessert was served, Jonathan cleared his throat, wanting to acknowledge the change. "I've been watching you too," he said, looking at Alex and Max, "and I have to say, I'm impressed. I haven't seen you both this well-behaved in a long time. What's going on?" Max, always the more outspoken twin, looked up from his plate. "It's Lily," he said, his voice full of admiration. "She gets us. She's not like the others. She doesn't yell at us or treat us like we're trouble." Jonathan's heart swelled. He glanced at Lily, who was sitting quietly at the end of the table, a modest smile on her face. She wasn't seeking praise. She was simply content to be part of the family. It was a moment of realization for Jonathan. He had built his empire with sheer determination and force, but it was Lily's gentle strength that had truly brought his family together. For the first time in years, the Westfield family was beginning to feel like a real family, not just a collection of individuals bound by wealth and status. But as much as Jonathan appreciated the change in his sons, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. He had been so focused on work, so consumed by his empire, that he had neglected his children. He had missed out on their early years, and in a way, he had lost touch with them. Now, with Lily's help, he was beginning to reconnect with them. He looked across the table at his sons. "I'm proud of you both," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "But I also want to thank Lily for helping you become who you are today. You, too, are better because of her." The twins looked at Lily, their faces full of gratitude. It was clear they had developed a deep respect for her, not just as their caretaker, but as someone who had helped them unlock a part of themselves they never knew existed. Lily smiled at them, her eyes filled with warmth. "I'm just here to help," she said softly. Jonathan could see the bond between them all. It wasn't just about discipline or control anymore. It was about understanding, trust, and love. He knew that his family was changing for the better, and he was determined to continue fostering that change. Later that night, as the twins went to bed, Jonathan sat alone in the living room, reflecting on the past few weeks. He thought about his relationship with his children and how much it had been altered. He realized that he had always believed that success came from power and control. But now, he understood that true success, the kind that mattered, came from connection. The connection between a father and his children, between a family and the people who care for them. And as he sat there, he made a promise to himself. He would never again let his empire overshadow his family. He had learned that the most valuable things in life weren't the ones that could be bought. They were the relationships, the trust, and the love that he had once taken for granted. With Lily's help, Jonathan was beginning to build something far more valuable than wealth, a real family. The change in the Westfield household was becoming more apparent every day. Jonathan had never imagined that the presence of one person, a 10-year-old girl who was not even part of his world, would turn everything upside down. Lily had done more than just manage his wild twin sons. She had transformed their entire household dynamic. They were no longer just his children. They were becoming his partners in creating something real, something meaningful. Jonathan watched as his sons, Alex and Max, began to take on more responsibility. They helped around the house, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. They listened to Lily, asked her for guidance, and took pride in doing things on their own. Their grades improved, and their behavior at school was better. It was as if they had found a new purpose. For Jonathan, this was a revelation. He had spent so many years building his empire, thinking that success and wealth were the only things that mattered. But now, he was beginning to see the value in something deeper. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Jonathan found himself watching his sons with a smile. Alex was telling a story about how he helped a classmate with a math problem, while Max excitedly described a science experiment they had done at school. The conversation was lighthearted, full of laughter and curiosity. It was everything Jonathan had wanted for them, but never thought possible. His eyes shifted to Lily, who was sitting quietly at the table, her presence calm and steady. She wasn't seeking attention, but Jonathan could see the profound impact she had on his family. She had brought them closer together, not by giving orders, but by showing them how to care for one another. "You've done more for them than I ever could," Jonathan said, his voice sincere. Lily looked up, meeting his gaze. "They just needed someone to believe in them," she replied. Jonathan nodded. "I think we all did." But just as things seemed to settle into a new normal, an unexpected event shook the foundation of their peaceful household. Late one afternoon, a phone call came that would alter everything. Jonathan's business, which had been booming, suddenly faced a major crisis. A key deal he had been working on for months was falling apart. There was a financial setback, and the company's reputation was on the line. Jonathan's mind immediately raced with thoughts of how to fix it. He had dealt with business challenges before, but this one felt different. It was personal. The weight of his empire suddenly felt heavier than ever before. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, the consequences could be devastating. As he hung up the phone, he felt a pang of guilt. He looked at his sons, who had been eagerly waiting for him to join them for a game. Their innocent faces, full of hope and joy, reminded him of what he stood to lose. He couldn't let his mistakes in business affect them. That evening, after they had gone to bed, Jonathan found himself sitting in the dark of his office, staring at the glowing screen of his computer. His mind raced with calculations, strategies, and numbers. He knew he had to act fast, but the pressure was overwhelming. Just as he was about to make a call to his business partner, he heard a soft knock on the door. It was Lily. "I know you're busy," she said softly, stepping into the room, "but I thought you might want some company." Jonathan looked at her, surprised. He hadn't expected anyone to come in, especially not Lily. But her calm presence was exactly what he needed. She sat down next to him and didn't say anything at first. Instead, she simply watched him, letting him gather his thoughts. After a few moments, she spoke. "You don't have to do this alone," she said gently. "You have your family, and we're all here to support you." Her words hit Jonathan harder than he expected. He had been so focused on his business, so determined to succeed, that he had forgotten the one thing that truly mattered, the people who cared about him. Lily had seen through his walls. She had always known that success wasn't just about money or power. It was about love, support, and the connections we make along the way. Jonathan sat back in his chair, his shoulders finally relaxing. He realized that, in his pursuit of success, he had almost lost what mattered most. But with Lily's help, he was beginning to understand that true success wasn't about what you had, but who you had by your side. The following weeks were a test for Jonathan Westfield, not just in business, but in his personal life as well. The crisis at work had escalated, and Jonathan found himself caught between trying to fix the company's future and being present for his sons. Every day, he would dive into meetings, conference calls, and long hours of work, but the pressure was beginning to weigh on him. He was feeling the strain of managing everything at once. But in the quiet moments, when he looked at his children and Lily, something became clear. This was not the life he had imagined. but it was becoming the life he wanted. One evening, after a long day of stress, Jonathan came home late to find his son sitting on the couch, engrossed in a board game. Alex looked up when he entered, his eyes still bright with the spark of the playful energy he had regained. "Dad, you should join us," Alex said, his voice a mix of excitement and challenge. Max, who had always been a bit more serious, nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, come on, you never play with us anymore." Jonathan stood frozen for a moment. He realized that he had missed so many of these moments, these small, simple moments of connection. His first instinct was to make an excuse, to remind them that he had to work. But then he remembered Lily's words. "You don't have to do this alone." The thought of being alone in his responsibilities, without the support of his family, was no longer something he could ignore. "All right," he said, walking over to join them. "I'm in." The game was simple, but the laughter and the teasing that followed made it feel like the most important moment of the day. For the first time in weeks, Jonathan found himself relaxing, his mind momentarily free from the chaos of work. He could hear the twins laughing, arguing over small things, but in a way that felt normal, like family. Lily, who had been watching quietly from the kitchen, smiled to herself. She had seen how much Jonathan was struggling with the pressure, and though she knew she couldn't fix everything, she also knew that sometimes, all it took was for him to be present. The next day, after a long conference call that had drained all of his energy, Jonathan stood in his office looking at the pile of papers in front of him. He had made a decision. He couldn't keep running the business the same way. He had been so consumed by the drive for success that he had almost lost everything that truly mattered. His family, the people who had supported him, had become secondary. And now, he knew he had to make changes. That afternoon, Jonathan sat down with his business partners, and for the first time in years, he made a decision not driven by profit, but by what was best for his family and his health. He told them he would be stepping back from the day-to-day operations and that it was time for new leadership. The decision shocked his partners, but they couldn't argue with the truth of it. Jonathan had reached a point where he needed balance, and for that to happen, he had to take a step back. After the meeting, he returned home to find the twins in the living room, working on a new project with Lily. They were building a model airplane, and their faces were focused, determined. When they saw Jonathan, they invited him to join, but he smiled and shook his head. "Not today," he said. "Today, I just want to be here with you guys." It was in that moment, as he watched his sons, that Jonathan realized how much he had missed. He had spent so much time building his empire that he had forgotten to build the connections that mattered most. And now, he was ready to change that. Lily had shown him that true wealth was not measured by the size of one's bank account, but by the love and respect of those around you. As he sat down to spend the evening with his sons, Jonathan felt a deep sense of peace. His world was still full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he knew he was on the right path. And with Lily's guidance, he knew he could finally begin to rebuild what he had once taken for granted. As the weeks went by, Jonathan's decision to step back from his company started to show positive results. The strain he had felt from managing everything on his own was lifting. He was spending more time with his family, especially his sons, who were now more open and engaged than ever before. The connection between them had deepened, and Jonathan could see the difference in their behavior. They were not only more respectful, but were showing a level of maturity that he hadn't expected. Max, who had once been the more difficult twin, was now helping Alex with his homework without being asked. Alex, too, was starting to show a gentler side, taking more time to think before acting. Their transformation was undeniable. But the change wasn't just in the twins. Jonathan had also found himself changing, and it was largely due to Lily. She had come into their lives as a quiet presence, yet in the short time she had been with them, she had brought about a shift in everyone. Her wisdom and compassion had allowed Jonathan to see his own weaknesses, the parts of himself that had been clouded by his ambition. She had shown him that success was not about wealth or power, but about the relationships you build and the people who stand by you. One evening, as Jonathan sat in the living room, watching his sons play a game together, he realized how far they had come. His mind drifted to the days before Lily's arrival, when he was consumed with work and disconnected from his family. He had been so focused on building his empire that he had missed out on the most important part of life, being present for the people he loved. He looked at Lily, who was sitting quietly across the room, her gentle smile lighting up her face as she watched the twins interact. Jonathan knew that none of this would have been possible without her. As he reflected on how much had changed, a deep sense of gratitude filled him. He had once thought that his success was all that mattered, but now he understood that true fulfillment came from the relationships he had nurtured and the connections he had made. The next day, Jonathan made another bold decision. He called a meeting with his business partners and informed them that he would be handing over the reins of the company to a trusted colleague. He was ready to step back completely and focus on his family. It was a decision that shocked some of his partners, but Jonathan was firm. He had realized that his health and his family were more important than any business deal. That afternoon, as Jonathan walked through the halls of his mansion, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He had made the right choice. He knew that, with Lily's help, he could continue to nurture the bond with his sons and build a future based on what truly mattered. Later that evening, Jonathan joined the twins and Lily in the garden. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the yard as they sat together, talking and laughing. The bond between them was stronger than ever, and Jonathan felt a deep sense of contentment. He realized that everything he had been searching for, love, connection, and peace, was already here, in the family he had nearly lost. As the night wore on, Jonathan knew that he had found something far more valuable than wealth or power. He had found a family, and that was something money could never buy. As time passed, Jonathan found himself becoming more and more comfortable with his new way of life. His decision to step back from his business was not easy, but it was the right one. His sons, Alex and Max, were thriving in ways he had never imagined. They were not just doing well in school. They were becoming more compassionate, more thoughtful, and, most importantly, more connected to him. He had missed so much over the years, but now, he was fully present. Lily, the quiet force who had entered their lives, had made all the difference. Her ability to listen, to understand, and to connect had brought his family back together in a way that was nothing short of miraculous. Every day, she continued to guide the twins, offering them wisdom and patience that no one else had ever been able to provide. Jonathan had come to realize that Lily wasn't just a caretaker for his children. She was a mentor, a teacher, and a friend. He began to understand the true value of her presence in their lives. She had shown him that love and family were more important than anything else. One afternoon, as Jonathan sat in his study, reflecting on how far they had come, he received a call from his business partner. The conversation was short but intense. There had been some new developments in the company, and they were in need of Jonathan's expertise. It was a pivotal moment. Jonathan had promised himself that he would no longer let his work consume him, but he knew this could not be ignored. He sat quietly, weighing his options. He could go back into the business, dive back into the world he had left behind, but what would that mean for his family? For Lily? For his sons? After a few minutes, Jonathan picked up the phone and made a decision that shocked him. He declined the offer. "I've made my choice," he said firmly. "My family is my priority now." It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt right. His sons, who had seen him struggle with his work-life balance, looked at him with admiration and respect. For the first time, Jonathan felt like he was truly leading by example. Later that evening, as they all gathered around the dinner table, Jonathan shared his decision with his family. Alex and Max were quiet at first, processing what their father had said. Then, Max, with a grin, said, "I think you made the right choice, Dad." Alex nodded in agreement. "We're glad you're here with us." Jonathan felt a surge of emotion as he looked at his sons. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He had spent so many years chasing success, believing that it was the only way to provide for his family. But now, he realized that the greatest gift he could give them was his time, his attention, and his love. As the days turned into weeks, Jonathan's new life began to take shape. He spent more time with his sons, taking them to school, attending their activities, and sharing quiet moments together. He and Lily continued to work as a team, supporting each other and helping the family grow stronger. One evening, as they sat in the backyard, watching the sunset together, Jonathan felt a deep sense of peace. He had found something more valuable than wealth or success. He had found his family, and with Lily's guidance, they had found their way back to each other. Jonathan knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but with his family by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges came their way. The past few months had been transformative, not just for him, but for all of them. He had learned that the most important things in life weren't the things he had achieved, but the people who had supported him along the way. And with that realization, Jonathan made a vow to never again lose sight of what truly mattered: love, family, and the bond they shared. As the months passed, the changes in Jonathan Westfield's life became more and more evident. His decision to step back from the business world and focus on his family was paying off in ways he hadn't anticipated. His relationship with his sons, Alex and Max, was stronger than ever. They were no longer the wild, unruly boys they had once been. They were thoughtful, respectful, and, most importantly, they were connected to him in a way he had never thought possible. Jonathan had also found a new sense of balance in his life. He no longer spent every waking moment thinking about business. Instead, he spent his time at home, with his sons, and with Lily. The bond between them had deepened, and he knew that this was where he belonged. The quiet moments they shared were some of the most precious. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat in the garden, watching the sun set over the horizon, Jonathan realized how far they had come. He thought about the man he had been, the businessman who had once put everything above his family. And then he thought about the man he was now, a father, a partner, and a man who had learned the true meaning of success. It wasn't about the size of the empire you built, but the relationships you nurtured along the way. The twins, now more responsible and engaged, had even started helping around the house without being asked. They worked together with Lily on projects, from fixing things around the house to planning weekend activities. Jonathan couldn't remember the last time they had been so eager to spend time together. It was a new chapter in their lives, one that was full of hope and promise. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Jonathan looked around at his family. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. The chaos that had once ruled his life had been replaced by love, understanding, and mutual respect. He glanced at Lily, who was sitting beside him, her eyes gentle and kind. She had been the catalyst for this transformation. Without her, he knew they would still be lost in the same old patterns. She had brought them together, not through force or discipline, but through understanding and patience. "You've changed everything for us," Jonathan said, his voice filled with gratitude. Lily smiled softly, her eyes meeting his. "I just helped you see what was already there," she said quietly. The words struck Jonathan deeply. He realized that, while Lily had helped guide them, it was their own willingness to change, to open their hearts and minds, that had made all the difference. They were all different now, and for the first time, Jonathan felt like he was truly living. He had his family, his health, and the knowledge that true success was about the connections you make, not the things you collect. As the evening wore on, Jonathan couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. He had come full circle. The man who had once believed that power and money were everything had finally learned that the greatest wealth was found in love and family. He no longer had to chase success, because he had already found it. With his sons by his side and Lily as a guiding light, Jonathan knew that the future was bright. The road ahead might have its challenges, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face them, not alone, but with the people who mattered most. And that was more than enough. Discover an inspiring journey in Millionaire Stories as a successful businessman learns the true value of family and personal connection. In this touching tale, a billionaire struggles with his work-life balance, spending more time building his empire than being with his sons. However, everything changes when a housekeeper's daughter, Lily, enters their lives. Her wisdom and kindness help guide the family back together, turning the chaotic household into one full of love, understanding, and mutual respect. This transformation takes place against the backdrop of billionaire lifestyle, but the true wealth discovered lies in the bonds they build. With Lily's influence, the twin sons of the billionaire learn to be responsible and compassionate, and their relationship with their father strengthens in ways he never thought possible. Throughout this millionaire story, the importance of family, love, and the lessons learned from life's challenges take center stage. Jonathan, the millionaire businessman, realizes that true success is not defined by wealth, but by the people who support and love you. This millionaire story reveals how prioritizing family over business can bring more happiness than any financial success ever could. The journey of rediscovery is not just about the transformation of the businessman. but also about the lessons his children learn along the way, making it a powerful addition to any collection of millionaire stories. These stories show how personal growth can come from unexpected places, teaching invaluable lessons about the power of connection, family, and understanding. As Jonathan steps away from his empire to focus on his loved ones, the billionaire story becomes a testament to the importance of prioritizing what truly matters in life, echoing themes from the world of millionaire stories.